Okay, I know they're going for an Isaac Newton sort of thing here, but I think if an apple as big as your freaking body fell on your head, it wouldn't just bounce off. It'd probably do something more like this. Today's ancient DOS game is known simply as UGG, and it's a bit of an oddity for a large number of reasons, which is part of the reason why I wanted to cover it, since really, the gameplay is so simple that if it weren't for these oddities, there wouldn't really be much to talk about. To put it simply, UGG is a taxi game, with the goal being nothing more than to take passengers from one place to another. But it's handled in a clever way, by not only placing the game in a prehistoric context, but also by making the method of transportation a flying box thing of sorts. I don't know what it is, but suffice to say, the game has some interesting points. So let's start things off with the game stats. UGG was the second Amiga game ever developed by Egosoft, now known for the X series of space simulation games, though the DOS port was handled by Bones Park Software Artistic and published by Playbyte in 1992. Despite the taxi aspect, it is ultimately a 1 to 2 player platforming game, supporting only VGA 320x200 256 color graphics and ad-lib sound and music, contrary to some of the technical information about this game floating around the net. Speaking of inaccuracies, the release date of this game is very ambiguous. The game was originally published in a box and sold at retail, as you'd expect, but then things get a little hazy. First of all, there are no accompanying files with this game. It is a single executable file, and that's it. Secondly, the game itself has no copyright information anywhere on display. It does have some logo screens on startup, but again, no copyrights, which is just plain weird. And thirdly, there was supposedly a shareware release of this game sometime in the mid-90s on various bulletin board systems, but this shareware release, quote-unquote, seemed to have been the full game, and again, no accompanying documentation as to how to actually purchase it. My copy happens to come from my 2000 shareware game CD. Lastly, there are free downloads of this game on numerous legitimate websites, but not a single one of them have any additional information about the legal status of this game, just details on the gameplay itself. And all that said, if you want to try the game for yourself, just search the net. It's really easy to find. However, if you want an actual physical copy, firstly, good luck. They're not easy to come by. And secondly, make sure you're getting the version you want, since it came out on the C64 and Amiga as well. Also keep in mind that there's another game called UGG, complete with the exclamation point, released by Softtech in 1983, and it is not the same game, even though it shares the caveman theme and has the exact same title. So the story goes that a caveman in prehistoric times is trying to impress the local cave babe, who only wants to be seen with a man who's rich and can provide her with lots of money and jewelry. Yeah, this game's got a bit of a stereotype thing going for it. In any case, the caveman you play as decides the best way to get lots of money and jewelry is to invent a flying thingamajiggy. But that's still not good enough, so he thinks about it a little more and realizes that he can use his invention to not only take other cavemen to other places, but charge them in the process. Thus begins your quest through 69 levels to rack up as many points as possible. Yes, 69 levels. I swear I am not making that up. The gameplay itself is incredibly simple. You use the arrow keys to accelerate your craft in various directions and need to take each cave person from one location to another. You do this by landing somewhere that's level to one of the caves and then wait for the cave person to board your craft. Then just go to the cave they want to go to, touch down level with it, and you get paid. The faster you go, the more points you get, but of course it's a little more complicated than that. Firstly, the build quality of your little flying box thingy isn't very great. If you hit any surface too fast, the screen will fade out and you'll lose a life. Lose 3 lives and the game is over. Changing the skill level between easy, medium, and hard determines how fast you can hit something and survive, as well as how high your multiplier can go. Your multiplier starts at 1x and can go as high as 3x on easy and 9x on medium. As for hard difficulty, I have no idea how high the multiplier can get, because hard requires you to be really careful with the controls, and to raise your multiplier requires you to complete a trip within just a couple seconds. Plus, if you lose a life, your multiplier resets to 1x. So to get those really high scores, you not only have to get your multiplier up as fast as possible, but you also have to not die. Actually, that's something that bothers me about this game, is that the only transitions that ever happen are fade-outs. If you smash into something, fade out. If you get smacked by the birds, as this game calls them, fade out. If you run out of stamina, fade out. If you win the level, fade out. As you can imagine, if your last ride for the level was right at the edge of your stamina gauge, it can be really frustrating if you fade out, only to realize you have to do the entire level all over again. Speaking of stamina, most of the levels have trees in them which will provide you with fruit when you drop rocks on them, in the order of apple, banana, pear, cherries, coconut, watermelon, orange, kiwi, and strawberry, after which the tree won't provide any more fruits. Each fruit provides a different amount of stamina, with some restoring almost the entire bar, and others barely restoring any. So I don't recommend grabbing fruit if you have over half of your stamina left, unless you have a feeling you're going to need it. Dealing with the rock can be a bit tricky. Basically, you pick it up by touching it, and then by pressing the joystick button or the right control key on the keyboard, you drop it. The angle it drops at is the same as the angle you're moving at, so it's much easier to drop the rock onto something if you land right in front of that something first, then fly straight upwards and drop the rock straight down. This is also an important trick to keep in mind, because if the rock falls in such a way that it will hit something from a horizontal angle, it doesn't bounce back, and you completely lose the rock for the remainder of the level. As far as actually winning a level goes, there's a number at the bottom middle of the screen that tells you how many cave people you need to bring to their final destination to clear the level. And each cave person in the level will have a certain final destination in mind and will likely want to go to other locations first. Once you bring one of them to their final destination, this number goes down. Once you know how many different cave people are actually in the level, you can use this number to gauge if you can make a mistake or not and still succeed. One mistake you're probably going to make early on is crashing right into someone and knocking them completely off the platforms and into the water below. If you can get your craft down onto the water, they'll swim over to you and you can still take them to where they need to go. It's just, don't expect a tip after all that. You need to get down to them quickly though, otherwise they'll sink, and if there's not enough cave people left to clear out that bottom middle counter, then, well, you're just going to have to restart the level. Just don't restart the level by hitting escape though, because pressing the escape key ends the entire game without a confirmation of any kind. So yeah, don't try that. The cave people themselves include cavemen, cave ladies, and cave grannies. The ladies tip a little more than the men, and the grannies tip almost twice as much as the ladies. Beyond that, the only difference between them doesn't come into play until you knock one of them into the water, in which case the men stay afloat the longest, the ladies stay afloat for a little, and the grannies only stay afloat for like 2 seconds. As I said, this game's got a bit of a stereotype thing going on, even on the box art. Beyond just ferrying passengers around, you also have to worry about 3 different kinds of prehistoric beasts: birds, dinos, and triops. No, not that triop. The triops in this game are mostly friendly, except that if you land level with them, they get kinda mad and rush your craft, sending it soaring if they hit. Until they actually charge though, they're not a threat at all, so when you knock one out with a rock, feel free to land right over top of it to pick up your passenger. The birds are very annoying, but at least they're predictable. In any level where they'll appear, you'll hear a sound cue before they do, and they will always appear in line with you on the opposite side of the screen. So just make sure you have a good way to fly straight up away from them and you should be fine. But keep in mind that they have terrible hit detection in their favor, so try not to be anywhere close to the birds when they appear. Lastly are the dinos, which for the most part are inconsequential because they just sleep a level away, causing your craft to get sucked in or pushed away by their breath if you get close. Normally this isn't that big a deal, but if you happen to land in line with one of them and then take off after a moment, their breathing will cause your craft to shoot away, usually into a solid object. And you can temporarily stop their breathing by hitting them with the rock, but usually you'll end up losing the rock in the process, so be careful about that. So yeah, just clear 69 levels and you'll finally get the girl. I mean seriously, for a game that barely has any words in it, the innuendo just doesn't stop. Heck, the password for level 68 is 0 sex. Yeah, Actually, all the passwords in this game are directly taken from the song titles of two different bands, Christian Death and Current 93. And I should also note that the passwords are completely different in the two-player mode, which I'm not going to talk about because the two-player mode isn't really all that great, since both players share the same stamina bar, the same goals, and if one player goes down, both players restart the level. So it really doesn't feel like a proper two-player mode, just a tacked-on extra, really. I do have a couple quick tips, too. Firstly, if you touch the ground without going too fast vertically, you instantly stop moving horizontally, even if you're going blazing fast. So this is a good thing to keep in mind for getting your multiplier up. Secondly, you can slam full speed into the sides or top of the screen without any issues. So again, that's another thing to keep in mind for doing your rides as fast as possible. And yeah, that's all there really is to say about UGG. It's an interesting game. Not exactly one I'd recommend because the gameplay is finicky and feels kinda unfinished, but then the overall concept behind the game is fun enough, so really, it's worth a shot at least once, but I wouldn't go out of my way to find a copy. As for DOSBox settings, just leave cycle set to auto and you're good to go. Yeah, even the joystick support works without any extra configuration. Mind you, I recommend playing this game with a keyboard and not a joystick, just to get that extra tap precision you'll need for those tight spots in some of the levels. Anywho, that's all for today's episode of Ancient DOS Games. Next week on episode 77, we're taking a look at the game I've received the most requests to do. And since I've said which game this is more than once before, the guesses are going to roll in really quickly, so make sure you send yours to adg@pixelships.com and stay tuned for next Saturday.